Hello, everyone. How are we doing this lovely salute day? Hopefully you guys have all had a fun and amazing conference so far. Yeah, there we are. I saw at least 2 nods. Enthusiasm. So for the next 45 minutes, you are going to have the time of your life as we talk about wargaming in the real world. My name is Alex Vince. I am Deputy Head of Collective Leadership in the British government. I'll let you try and work out what that means. I'm not sure I still understand it. And I'll just do a quick kind of round of introductions before we talk a little bit about where wargaming fits in each of our careers. So, Dr. Ian, do you want to just say hello?
Hello.
Perfect. Dr. David, do you want to say hello?
Hello.
Major Tom.
Hi.
Rob.
Yeah, is this on?
Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. Alysso.
Hello, hello.
Fantastic. So, you guys are probably here to understand a little bit more about how wargaming fits into, I don't know if we can call them serious careers, but some applications where it appears in some fairly odd and interesting places. So, myself, I am a civil servant. I've worked in government for about the last 10 years or so, and I have used serious games in a variety of different ways. And I roughly think it can be broken down into 5 different categories. The first place where we see a lot of use of serious games is education. Serious games, the way of guiding someone through a process, through a scenario, through a simulation, is a fantastic way of introducing them to ideas of immense complexity. You can sit in a lecture theatre for hours listening about a thing, or you can spend half an hour taking a role, making decisions about that thing, and I guarantee you, as you practice and you do, you'll come away with a far greater understanding of what that thing could look like. I once met a guy who made this fantastic game based around satellite orbits, and this entire game was about which satellite orbits to use to spy, look at things from high up in the orbit and see what you can find. And I left with that game after probably about 45 minutes with an understanding of specific orbit types that still stick with me to this day because I had to use them in action. So the first of these things that serious games do very well is education. The second thing that they do really well is help you practice process. This is another thing where actually, particularly in government, many of the crises that we'll have to respond to are things that we hope never happen. And so you do not get to spend hours and hours and hours practicing these things in real life. Playing through games and simulations, exercising, is one of the few ways we can build up some rough idea of what these things could look like and how we might need to work with them before a crisis hits. So they're very good ways for building up skills and at least experimenting with things that you may never get to do. Also, it's a lot more cheap to play with an aircraft carrier on a tabletop than it is to get the actual aircraft carriers out. The third thing that they do, and this is a bit of a dark art, is analysis. You know, your proper hard strategic wargaming, which allows you to think about the future and puzzle out some of the things that might happen. As people up here will say, you can't use it to predict the future, but it is a way, if you have the right expertise with you and you do it in the right way, a way of analyzing things that you hope never come to pass. So there is a role for analysis in this as well. The fourth, and this is particularly relevant to my area, is community. When you put a load of people into a space to play a game together, you will build up relationships between those people and those teams that it's very hard to make when you're just sending emails like across vast distances. Particularly nowadays, as we work from home a lot more and we work from different cities to each other, games give us a good opportunity to come together in real life and actually spend time building up the relationships that really matter when going gets tough. And the last one is actually one that I didn't have on my list before today. It's been inspired by the fantastic Fight for America project. But serious games have a growing role in art. So again, exposing people to experiences and those kind of things that is very hard to just tell them about, to actually invoke a proper feeling of emotion as you play through some of the weird and crises and experience these things is a fantastic role for them. So those are 5 things I think serious games can be extremely good for in the real world. I'm now going to go to Ian and say, where do serious games fit into your life?
I'm just going to broaden things out a bit and say wargaming in the real world is more than just serious games. So I feel like we had the first Warhammer conference last year, and there were some amazing looks at kind of war games in, I guess, uses that are more about fun and more about that. The great scholar of play, Panksepp, would say generating positive emotional states. I don't disagree with anything Alex has said about all these uses, but actually having fun is really, really important, and games do that really, really well. And some of the serious applications can be about fun. We had a paper about finding mindfulness and spiritual flow through painting miniatures, which I think probably most of us have got some experience of. So I mean, I love the broadening out a little bit, and I feel it's important to do so. Yeah, my background, I did game design for ages, mostly tabletop RPG stuff, licensed Conan game for Mongoose Publishing 20-odd years ago, and a whole load of other things around that D&D 3.0, 3.5 area. And then morphed over into academia about 15 years ago and did a PhD in Warhammer 40k and Minecraft and World of Warcraft, and why people cared about those and played them, what the motivation was for playing all those things. So I now teach narrative design and board game design, particularly at Teesside University, and do research in Warhammer, miniatures, wargaming, ethical game design, narrative games, etc. And that's pretty much me.
So hello everyone. So I'm the senior wargaming lecturer at the War Studies Department in King's College London, and I've been in that role now since August 2020. A bit of my background: I'm originally from Ireland. You may be able to hear that. My accent comes and goes. But I lived in the United States for nearly 20 years, where I got my PhD in international relations as a major and methods as a minor. And most of my IR research is about diplomacy. So I'm a diplomacy scholar. But I came to King's because King's was actively recruiting a wargaming lecturer, which is actually a very unusual position in a civilian university. It's not uncommon in military universities, but I'm not aware of another civilian wargaming lecturer. It's certainly in the UK. And they were recruiting on that, and I had done some research using a wargame. And that made me qualified to apply for the job, which is more than most people were, because that's not a very common practice in academia, wargaming. It's very much in its infancy. So in King's, I'm the academic director of the King's Wargaming Network, which is a collection of scholars, PhD students and faculty, post-PhD faculty, who are committed to developing wargaming as an analytic method and as an educational tool, and to democratizing wargaming and making it more readily usable and available to other researchers who are often very stymied by it. A big part of our project or our relationship to wargaming is that we're interested in understanding if and how it works. We know it works, but we're not quite sure how it works. And so from the position as a method scholar, it's useful for us to be able to get that greater foundation of what is actually going on inside of a game. How do we know a game is generating results that are defensible? And so a lot of the research that myself and my colleagues are doing are really kind of getting at those specific kinds of questions. How do organizations learn? How do actors become immersed? What is a game? How do you know it's producing effective knowledge? How do you know it's producing biased knowledge? And so on and so forth. So we come at it from a very different space. As a final statement on that, before I turn it over to Tom, wargaming is very much a community of practice. So we are orbiting a much bigger sphere of active practitioners who've been around for literally hundreds of years. So from the academic side, it's in its infancy. These questions are being asked for the first time. From the practitioner side, a lot of these questions have already been answered, and I've discovered that on my own research, but from a practical side. And so it's kind of going through this interesting translation of trying to turn the knowledge that people have internally or in practice and trying to turn it into something that newcomers could learn from reading from a page.
Hello everyone, I'm Major Tom Moat. I am the officer commanding the Defense Wargaming Modeling and Simulation School. Previously, it was the Modeling and Simulation School, but I've been interested in wargaming for a while within the MOD, and I've been doing a sort of minor insurgency for the last 14 years, getting more wargaming in. There is an old saying that wargaming in the military comes to the fore when we need it. Well, we really need it right now. So in addition to the simulation and modeling that I'm involved in, I am now responsible for running a series of wargaming courses in order to educate people about wargaming, from the foundation through the practitioner to the game designer. This is proving quite difficult because, of course, we need academic rigor in there and a pathway that goes in that direction. Lots of people have done wargaming courses in the past, which are a couple of cursory lectures and an excuse to play games. What we want to do is to work out what we need to do for the majority of our users, what little we need to do for a minority of our users, and then talent spot people to work at the highest levels in defense and also to work for DSTL as well, because they have a certain analytical mindset. So the majority of what I do is educating soldiers how to fight. But there is a bit of analysis in there, and I do need a bit of academic rigor, because someone's going to say, well, why does this work? And I go, well, you know, you want me to prove it? Prove to me that education works. And we'll leave it at that. So that's my job. I get paid to teach people using games. It took my entire career to get here. But now that I'm here, I'm hanging on. I am 67 years old and still in uniform. But, you know, who knows? I might get to 70 yet. Okay.
Thanks for that, Tom. So I'm Rob Grayston, and whilst this is very much on wargaming, and without wandering into definitions, I do a lot of this stuff without any war, because I'm involved in emergency planning and resilience. So flooding, counterterrorism, cyber attacks, anything along those lines, that's what I do. Quick potted history. Some of you here will be interested in moving into this space professionally. You will want to do this as a job. There is no clear pathway. I have previously worked as a customer support bod for Jagex, doing RuneScape stuff. I have previously, thank you very much, Jagex employee, I have also previously worked in an MP's office. I have done events for a international publisher, occasionally doing trade fairs and things. How the hell did I get here? I'm not entirely sure, but it helped that I got a job in resilience as a plan writer and a response officer. So I'd get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning saying there's been a flood or a fire. And from that, I have now moved into full-time testing and exercising. So as a quick example, my last month has involved a live exercise, doing some counterterrorism stuff. There's been online stuff. There's been multiple-day games, sometimes called games. Sometimes people don't like that. You say scenarios or exercises. Doing all sorts, from train derailments to floods. It's very varied, and occasionally we do actually get involved with some of our colleagues in camouflage and do some joint stuff. But otherwise, I'm very much here to answer any questions people might have where things possibly wander away from guns and rockets and that kind of logistics into my world. So thank you very much.
Right. I'm very much the odd one out here, because all my career, 30 years designing war games, but for profit, for commercial products. So not at all serious games, really. And just after 30 years of designing games like, I don't know, Games Workshop for 15 years, all sorts of stuff for them. Then my own company, a River Horse, for another 15 years. And we designed for ourselves, but also for other companies in the industry here, Warlord Games, Mantic Games, Bolt Action probably is recently the one that I've done that is most famous. And then I sold my company last year and went consultant. I was like, all right, oh yes, half-retirement, I can do different things and try different things. And out of the blue, I get contacted by the American Vicarious, which is this company, this theater production company based in New York. And they say, we are designing this new installation, this new art installation, interactive, and would you like to, could you write a game for us for this? And I was like, sounds interesting, completely out of my comfort zone, but yeah, now I can do that kind of stuff. What is it about? And so they were like, 6th of January, the Capitol thing that happened. I was like, oh, that's a bit, controversial, isn't it? So I was a little hesitant at first, I must admit, because obviously being still involved with commercial design, you kind of go, oh, should I go there? But then Christopher, the boss of American Vicarious, invited me over to Cambridge, to the Student Union, where they were doing one of their pieces, one of their theater productions, which is the Baldwin versus Buckley. So this debate that happened in the Cambridge Union, which was critical in me understanding what the American Vicarious does. And they are not taking sides. The purpose of that company is to encourage dialogue, because obviously we all know we live in a very, very polarized world, right? And they're trying to create these very controversial plays or interactive art events to make people that have very different points of view come together, engage in an activity, which is, in this case, will be playing a war game based on the 6th of January. One side defends the Capitol, one side tries to get into the Capitol. But the whole point of this exercise is to encourage people to talk to one another, is to humanize the other side, is to say, these guys think they are the good guys. These other guys think they are the good guys. They both think they are the good guys. And they both ultimately have one thing in common, is they love their country. They think they're doing the right thing for their country. And so trying to understand what motivates them, try to understand, ask questions and say, so why do you think this is like this? Why do you think this will help? So, and I saw that in the Baldwin versus Buckley thing myself. You know, I have my biases like everybody else, but I saw the other side point of view in a way that I hadn't seen before. So I was like, all right, I'm in. I will try this new thing. I will do my best to try to keep it unbiased, balanced, so that the idea is, whichever side you're on, you will enjoy this. You will enjoy the experience, hopefully, and then maybe you will talk to people and have a conversation that maybe you wouldn't have had because you thought, oh, the other guys are evil, the other side is evil, and I'm not going to engage with them at all. So trying to maybe avoid that conflict before it happens. It's a bit idealistic, I understand, obviously, but we try. I think it's worth trying.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. So we have two sides of academia: military, resilience, and commercial, who's now come over to the serious for art. So I think a fantastically varied panel. And I would love to take some questions from the floor. So while we have our fantastic microphone runner coming up to grab the microphone, I'm going to ask one question to both Alessio and Ian. How do you start thinking about serious problems when you start thinking about game design?
Sorry, say again?
How do you start thinking about serious problems when you start doing a game design?
Well, I mean, serious problems, my limited experience of doing something like that would be obviously the Fight for America project, but also, funnily enough, World War II designing, game design, because while it's still in living memory, obviously when you write rules for the German army, the Italian army, the British army, the Japanese army, you obviously want to go with the stereotypes because people obviously have seen movies and want to play the stereotypes. However, you have to do that without offending people, because sometimes the stereotypes are not very easy to accept for people from that country. So it's a very delicate matter of giving it flavor, making it entertaining, without actually going over the line and making it actually perceived as rude and offensive by people. And that's a very delicate, very difficult thing, both for bolt action, for World War II, but again, in Fight for America, for example, we try to avoid calling it an insurrection, or because again, one side would say, well, there wasn't an insurrection, it was, so we're trying to keep the language even so that both sides will go with it, and it could mean well for both sides. So yeah, very difficult, that, not offending, I would say.
Well, thank you very much. An important reminder to remember the human when we're doing kind of serious game design. Ian.
So I'm very keen on making the mechanics very transparent and easy to grasp. So I tend to take a kind of Eurogames inspirational approach and think, what's the core dynamic we want to look at here? So I worked on a climate crisis, save the planet, look at the next 20 years kind of game for a while. It didn't quite make it to publication, but it's still some nice ideas in there. we ended up with a beat bag mechanic for carbon in the atmosphere, and so the more pollution beads you're putting into the bag, the more likely you have a severe climate event resulting somewhere down the line where you have to draw beads out of the bag. So again, the players could see the bag getting heavier, they could see the pollution going in, and they could see the results of the pollution coming out, and it was really, really clear what the motive was. It was to avoid putting too much pollution in the bag, or put other stuff in the bag that would mitigate pollution, so you draw a green bead out rather than a grey one. That felt like a really sensible, smart starting place, and I'd aim to do something similar for any serious game, I guess.
Well, thank you very much. So now starting to take questions from the floor. I think I saw a question down here
This
first.
guy was jumping out of his seat, so we'll start with you.
Can you introduce yourself and then ask us your fantastic question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no worries. My name's Carter. I was a U.S. Army officer for about 12 years. Now I work out of St. Ives. And I got a two-part question for you. First, where have you seen the most success with wargaming at the tactical, operational, or strategic level? And that can translate into civilian as well. Like, at what level are you seeing the biggest impact of your training, of your rehearsals, whatever, you know, your the word's escaping me, but actually doing the training? And the second part is, we've got the awesome. Wargaming is really cool, and if you're bought into it, that's awesome and great. I love it too, but the so what? In other words, how do you get disinterested soldiers and civil servants involved and show them that what you're doing is effective in future planning and training, or within the operational space?
Right. Major Tom, do you want to pick the first half of that question up?
Okay, so yeah, I'll do the first half. Successful tactical, operational, strategic games. Very interesting. I was asked by the commanding officer of a regiment in Scotland. They're a light infantry battalion, and they're being mechanized. So I asked them what they're being mechanized with, and they said Jackal and Mastiff. And if you know anything about equipment provided to the British Army, that's the wretched refuse of Afghanistan, the bits that were left over and brought back to the UK. They might be useful driving around in Afghanistan, but driving off-road in Scotland, you don't have much chance. So I literally went up there, did a very simple double-blind free Kriegspiel with the commanding officer and the NCOs, and by the end of the day, they looked at the doctrine that they'd been given and decided it was rubbish. Sorry, I was about to say something else. And that was very simple. No rules, just military common sense, played the game double-blind, everyone got to participate. At the operational level, it's very interesting. At the Staff College, we've stopped messing about with red and blue, and the enemy is quite obvious who the enemy is. And the wargaming that we're introducing has changed. There is less emphasis on the single-shot kill probabilities and the fighty bit, and more emphasis on logistics. So there is one thing that we can be grateful to Putin for, is raising the importance of logistics to where it should be. And then at the strategic level, I've done wargaming with the Secretary of State's office and with a couple of other organizations, north and south of the river. And we've looked at very senior, very high-level games. And when you get the right people in the room, it's amazing what insights you can get out of those games. It's extraordinary. And the level of engagement and understanding that can come out of that is fantastic. However, that doesn't happen every time. So I'll stop there and hand over.
So, Dr. David, this question really got into games. Do they actually work?
Yes, so on that question then of when they're successful, I think very, very quickly, I mean, there's a few very famous historical cases, and if you read anything in wargaming, you'll immediately be presented with the famous Navy War College games that were run in the United States Navy War College from 1919 to 1939, 1940, about what would happen in a war with Japan. And that game was successful in that when they first started running that game, they were doing these big battle fleets, concentrations of battleships, which once you started playing a game set in the Pacific, they went nowhere and did nothing. And over the course of those many, many times of playing that game, they essentially discovered the island hopping aircraft carrier strategy that they actually end up using in the war. Chester Nimitz, the head of the US Naval Forces in World War II in Pacific, famously said, "There's nothing the Japanese didn't do to us that we hadn't already done to ourselves on the floor of the Naval War College, except for kamikazes." So that's a great success. Now, to your question more specifically, though, if we mean success to mean it's producing analytically useful results, of which that's kind of an example, we're less certain. Now, I think what my basic position on this is that when we have models in the world, or when we make models of things in the world for which we have very effective existing models, then the game can work very, very well. By which I mean things that are kinetic or material, right? So when we're modeling kinetic and material things, our theories of those kinetic and material things in the world are very, very effective, and they're shared, right? Most people have a shared model of how physics works. And so if I use that model and then you're playing the game, you probably have a similar model in your head. You experience the physical realm very similarly. And there's very little debate over that. I mean, I'm sure there is at the margins. But it means that when we're modeling kinetic things, which would be things tactical level, operational, less so at the strategic level, we can have a lot of consistent results. The games will produce results the same way over and over again. And furthermore, they'll map onto the real world in a reasonably effective way. As we start to introduce non-kinetic things, non-material things into our game, it becomes more complicated because we don't actually have consistent shared models of these things. Your definition of the national will could be quite different from my definition of the national will. Your definition of effective democracy might be very different from my definition of effective democracy. And academia is not going to save you because social scientists don't have shared definitions of these things. So it matters a great deal then, because the models that are going into your game, the things that people have in their head or the things you've built into your rule set, are going to produce your data. That's what's producing your data. And so we become less confident as we start adding more and more non-material factors. Now, there's two ways of thinking this. One is, firstly, you can never escape the non-material. One of the most important things in a tactical engagement is morale. And we do not have a good, consistent model of morale. So the model you include in your game is going to generate results that might be very different from my game, because I've got a different model of morale, even though everything else might be modeled the same. But as we start moving up into the operational, strategic, we're introducing more and more non-material factors, and we're going to have less and less confidence over what's going on. So a lot of my research right now is focusing on what does it mean when we have lots of different models inside players' heads. They're all standing around a map, but they may not be seeing the same thing when they look at that map. It's triggering different models inside their heads, and they're starting to combine those and click those together in different ways. But it's a long way of saying we're less confident about those kinds of games, or at least we have less of a consistent, defensible language that can say that one was good and this one was less good. That isn't, well, that's what actually ended up happening, or it feels right.
Right. But there was a second half of your question, which was about how you get people to buy in. And Rob, how do you get people to buy into exercising?
Well, I'm going to steal Tom's mic because someone stole mine. So buy-in is not always very easy because you do have, as mentioned, a bunch of people who look at what you're doing and say, we don't think that's going to work. I can cheat to a certain extent with some blue light services because they will have someone more senior who will tell them, you're rostered, you're going to it, which is really useful, but that can't happen every time. So you do effectively have to be successful and interesting because that will breed more success and interest, which is why, slight plug, we have things like, at the moment on LinkedIn, the Resilience Gaming Lab UK. So that's a thing that we've kicked off to try and get more interest because these things can be useful and can be helpful, as demonstrated by my lovely colleagues here. Hope that helps.
Thank you. And from my perspective, if you're asking the question of how you get these things running in the first place in a corporate environment, you kind of just have to get them running. Particularly nowadays, there is a huge call for opportunities for us to get teams together to do something a little bit different, right? Even if you're just using it as a space to focus on a common problem, if you can go out there, deliver it, provide it to your teams, then you will gain interest. They'll see the successes, and you'll gain more interest, more resources, more time. Some of the common challenges are, if you seriously say, let's run a serious game on a thing, to someone who doesn't really know about it, it's a scary thing. They're like, are you being serious about your serious game? And thus, if you're looking for a lot of permission, if you're looking for them to really push you hard to do it, do not expect that. You know, I was once offering to run challenge games for an area of government, and that area of government turned around to me and said, challenge games to help us think about challenging things we'll have to do? Sounds very modern. Let's do a challenge game. We have one request. What is the request? Do not put anything challenging in there. It might be awkward for us. Okay. I, at that point, said, I am going to say no to this as an opportunity because it didn't feel very authentic to actually what we were trying to get out of the entire thing. So yeah, it is possible, it is hard work, but with growing evidence of the number of people who take serious games seriously, now is a better time than any to try. So, are there any other questions from the audience? I am seeing this man with a beard over here on the white shirt.
Hi, I'm Kieran Snow. I'm just a bit of an enthusiast, really. Is this better? My question was, with the war in Ukraine and the advent of the cheap suicide drone and the like, has that changed military wargaming particularly heavily, or is it not a huge issue?
So that was with the advent of new drone technology, has that changed military wargaming? So I think this is a military wargaming question, Major Tom.
The answer to that is yes, and everyone starts talking about drones. But the important thing for you folks is there is a dearth of imaginative ideas about how we deal with that. So there are a lot of things that we can't do that are right on the edge. So stuff like January the 6th and thinking about drones. We'll have different contractors who will say, oh, no, it just means we have an open game because everyone can see everything, which is fundamentally not true. So what we end up doing is coming to places like this and look around for the innovation that gets out there, and also looking at adjacent organizations and say, you know, you're using drones a lot in disaster management. What are you learning and things like that? So yeah, we are absolutely aware that it's changing the face of warfare. How we deal with that is something that we are learning right now.
And I must say, you asked about it since the advent of the invasion of Ukraine. I was hearing from military wargamers that drones were going to be the next big thing years before Ukraine kicked off. Right, I saw another question over here, man with a very nice head. Exactly, there we are.
I'm assuming that's me. Hi, my name's John. I'm the clinical site manager for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I was responsible for repatriation of injured soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq. My main question is, it's more so for examples from yourself. I've run a few simulations, both in wargaming, tabletop, and practical. But I want to learn a little bit more about yourselves, about what success stories you've had in running simulations, or things which didn't quite go so well, both for study-wise or exercise-wise.
Thank you very much. So that was success stories from wargaming. Rob, particularly because you've just run a hospital game, do you have any stories to share?
Thank you very much, Alex, who was an excellent patient at that hospital game. So my experience is that some of the stuff we're doing doesn't always get to be seen in real life, or very rarely seen in real life, because of the nature of the big unpleasant disasters, and very much, touch wood, hoping that some of these things don't happen. But you do still get a lot of learning from where things fall over, and I would actively encourage a lot of the serious gamers, they already all do it, but any of you who are thinking we're going to do a fun game where everything works perfectly, no, that's not what you want. You want things where, for example, not giving too many details, someone accidentally sets the simulated PBIED off an hour early, and then the firearms team go, what the hell's that? That's not on the schedule. We all have to deal with that immediately. So there's a lot that can be learned from when things don't go right, and I don't know if I can share any specific examples from my own area, mostly because of the time frame I've been doing it, I've not had the chance to really screw up yet. Edit that bit out. I hope my boss doesn't see this. Thank you.
I mean, we recently played a game called the Unnamed Hospital Game, I think. And I was asked to be a patient. Why? Because my role was to be as annoying as possible to make sure those playing as the doctors, playing through the system, had a bit more friction and things weren't so easy, because real life is a messy thing. And I was very annoying indeed. So it is a very good way for modeling frustration and how you deal with that. David, do you want to talk some stories as well?
So I can give an example of a success and a failure. So we built a game for NATO, and there's a copy of it at the front of the thing at our stand, our Wargaming stand, all the way over there. And in the first stage of building that game, we built what's known as a seminar game. So it's just basically a map of the world, have a bunch of subject matter experts just come in, and we're using it essentially as a method to extract the models from their head, for want of a better phrase. But they're still engaged in a competitive dynamic, and we've been flirting around talking about definitions. I think the competitive consequence-based decision-making is critical in wargaming because it makes you think of things you would not have thought of. Now, the reason I say this is that in that game, it's set in the future, about 6 or 7 years in the future, the US team, this was all US foreign policy experts, recognized Taiwan's independence without China invading. Now, that's the only model that most people have in their head, is that China invades, US recognizes independence. But in this game, what happened is the US recognized the independence of Taiwan because in the previous turn, South Korea developed nuclear weapons. And in order for them to send a signal to that region of the world that they were still defending them, they made this very costly choice. Now, the reason I mention this is this was essentially what I call a synthetic causal mechanism. It was a synthetic model, a mechanism of seeing how this outcome could be generated. But crucially, none of the people in the room had thought of that until they played the game. The game, the constraints of the game, the contingency, the reaction to other people's decisions had made them think of new things that they couldn't have thought of otherwise that were plausible. Not likely, highly unlikely event, but given those initial conditions, plausible. And so that's a useful piece of data from that game, in my estimation. That I consider a success. Let me give you a quick failure, which is we built a logistics game for a different part of NATO. And one of the things that we did wrong, and this gets again at models, is we over-modeled the game. We made it a little bit too rigid. And worse than that, we're not logistics specialists. They are. So they spent much of their time going, that's not how this works. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. And so they were banging their head against the game, a game that we had designed poorly, frankly, where we should have actually built models around the things they knew rather than of the things they knew. And so that's an important thing as well. If your players know more than you, they know more than you. And so don't get in the way of what they're trying to do. What you should be doing is building models around that facilitate them making those choices sort of effectively.
Thank you very much. So I think we probably have time for one more question, and I'm seeing a man in a denim jacket over there in the center.
Hello, thank you. My name is Giovanni. I'm working professional service for a medical school, but I'm trying to shift. So my question is more relevant to education. Let's say that I'm a high school teacher of history or whatever you like, would like you to expand on the benefits in education that you mentioned, and what advice would you have? Can consider specifically history or anything else. It's up to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So that is the benefits of serious games for education. Ian, is this one you'd like to come in on?
Yeah, happy to do that. So there's quite a lot of research on this. Mary Flanagan's talk from Games for Change 2017 is really, really worth a look at this. The idea of building a game as the part of a research project. And so you carry it out like any other academic research project. You say, okay, we're trying to make a game for education. We need to build a way to measure it, measure the success of it as part of the project. Then you design the game, then you test it and measure it. And she has a really nice example of the Assassin's Creed games as a way to accidentally educate people hugely about history, right? In a way that you just couldn't do with a history book. And they may have errors in, but so do our brains. And if you measure before and after and find that the person knows more about Renaissance Florence after they played the game than before, even if they've got some errors in there, that's still a success. So I'd look into that as you almost have to do the kind of classic scientific experiment thing and say, okay, we're going to have one class that just learns in a traditional way, one that learns through games, and you will find the game lot do retain things if you design the game right. And again, I'd focus on the fun part, make sure it's going to be enjoyable. So what you never want to do is be the history teacher who says, we're not going to learn history today, we're just going to play a game. And then the kids are like, okay, bit suspicious. Are you lying to me? Oh, we're learning history, aren't you? You're just pretending it's a game. So you've got to sneak it in. And the finding from Flanagan, again, was 10 to 20% of educational content, 80 to 90% of game fun content is where you can sneak it in and not make it feel like it's just an exercise.
Thank you very much. And I know I was introduced to history with Age of Empires 2 at age 7. Alessio, you wanted to ask a question to the panel.
Well, funnily enough, that question has been kind of already answered, but I'll expand on it a bit. As a person that hasn't designed serious games, whenever I I even heard the term serious games, I find that the brain, at least my brain, the moment you hear the word serious and games, you instantly switch to, okay, this is a learning exercise. The part of my brain that is there for fun switches off, and I go into very different mode, right? While, is there a trick to the panel, or is it just simply that the word serious games is a bit of a bad marketing? It's like you should maybe challenge game, I don't know, a different word. But it's true that when you play for fun, and you don't think this is for learning, is for fun, you assimilate more, I think, in my experience at least. Example, I've learned to speak English by reading D&D manuals. Not because I wanted to learn English, but because I wanted to play the game. I have learned where Kamchatka is by playing Risk. Yep, stuff like that. So is there a trick to try to make the person that you're trying to teach things to kind of get out of that, oh, this is for learning, this is the part of the brain I need to engage, but how do you make them not turn that part of the, be a student, but how do you make them be a gamer and still make sure they assimilate something? Tricks and trips?
Okay, I'll quickly say I don't think you need to have people enjoying themselves or having fun in a serious game as long as it's an experience that they appreciate and take away. I ran a game, a gentleman called Quinns played it. Afterwards, I asked him, how did you find that resilience game? And he said, Jesus Christ, Rob, that was awful, but I can see why it happened, and now I understand a bit more about evacuating people during a flood. So, as long as it's something they can take away, it's meaningful, I think that's, for me, that's the key thing. And not just because I want to try and make, game journalists cry.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. But I also find that if I design the game so it's adversarial, then you get that competitive edge coming out. And so long as you've got somebody in the background red teaming to make sure that people are being realistic, then the fact that you've got two groups playing against each other, any worries about engagement normally run away.
Thank you very much. So one last question to the panel before we wrap up. Very quickly, if someone here wanted to join your world, what kind of things would you be keeping an eye out for? Ian, do you want to start us off when we'll go down the table?
Sure. I mean, joining academia is way more difficult and probably less advisable than it was when I did, in that there is no real resilience in the UK academic world right now. There's no money. People are getting made redundant. If you wanted to get into tabletop RPG design, though, it's easier than ever. The space between a super fan who designs the occasional game for fun and a pro game designer is very, very narrow. There's probably a lot of overlap there. DM's Guild, Drive-Thru RPG, if you can think of that amazing D&D game or war game that you always wanted to turn into a professional one, you can probably do it now. Barrier of entry is just your time. Are you willing to make it a professional one? In terms of the academia side, it's kind of get a master's, get 10 years of games industry experience, or get a PhD. Neither of those is necessarily fun or enjoyable or productive, so I can't wholly recommend either.
So on the side, if you were trying to be a researcher around gaming, right now, academia is quite responsive and accepting of it. I'm usually the harshest critic in my department when students bring games. Usually the other supervisor's like, that sounds great. So it's actually, if for anyone here who's doing a BA or an MA and is thinking about doing a dissertation, it's a good time to think about incorporating a game into your research. If you're doing it, pick something for which we don't have very many cases. It's the most easy way to defend the use of a game. We don't have cases, therefore I'm using synthetic data. If you're going to use a game for something we have cases of, it's much harder. Hang on, I'm sorry, let this person stop. The other thing is, in terms of becoming a war gamer, the demand is very high. Tom can speak about this much higher. So the critical thing here is get into a network. Come to the King's Wargaming Networks event. We're having a Wargaming Week in May. Come to that. Go to Connections. Tom is going to mention that. It is still a very porous boundary. It's important that people know you exist, or else they won't know that they could hire you. But as a last point on that is be literate in wargaming. Read some of the wargaming texts. There's not a huge amount of them. And be very appreciative of the fact that if you want to become a wargamer, you have to meet people at their level. One of the worst things I did in my career in wargaming is I built a war game for the US Marines. I built the kind of game I'd like to play. Complex, lots of rules, lots of bits and pieces, lots of stuff. It went straight into a drawer. They never used it. There's no point showing up and telling people what a game is. You have to build a game that they can play. That's a requirement for engagement. I don't like to use the word fun. I like to use the word engagement. But you need to be able to meet them at their level. That will bring them into the experience. And so if you're thinking about pitching a game to somebody, don't pitch the game you want to play. Pitch the game to the median person in the room. And you've got a better chance of getting them to buy in.
There's two things you've got to be good at. You've got to design games, and you've got to be able to facilitate games. Now, a lot of people can, play their own game. They can get jolly excited about it and explain it, but you need to be able to get it to a point where someone can pick up your game and see what it's about. So you need to have your own game design. You need to have a website so that you can point people to it so it's accessible. And you need to be able to facilitate games to explain them to people who don't understand what's going on. Now, a classic example is one of David's students, a young guy called Evan D'Alessandro. Now, he's got a website with all sorts of game designs as part of the PhD that he's doing. And it's a classic. He will turn up, he will run games, and run his own designs, and he will help facilitate other people. He's a shining example of the sort of people that we're looking to either employ or to hire to do stuff. Sadly, he's got an American passport, so he's doomed. But other than that, Rob's going to talk about how you can get experience in facilitation.
Okay, so I'll try to be as quick as possible because I'm aware of the time. Also, Evan is at the King's stand at the front. If anyone wants to go and say Tom said nice things about him. Mega Games. Everyone should go to Mega Games, wherever you are. Look up megagameassembly.com, and you will be able to give these things a try. It might be zombies turning up. It might be the Spanish Armada. You can get facilitation experience. You can play alongside a load of people who are doing the things we do. We love busman's holidays. Turns out when we're not doing professional stuff, we do the geeky stuff. In addition to that, if you are looking at resilience specifically, local resilience forums have training and exercising roles. Look those up. UK Resilience Academy is launching in the near future. It will have an exercising hub. Look at that. As well as KCL doing good stuff, Brunel University also have their own course where they're looking at wargaming and resilience planning gaming. So I've thrown a load of stuff at you there. If anyone has any further questions, grab me after this.
Right, I'll do the commercial side. If you want to become a games designer in a commercial environment, very similarly, first of all, play lots of games for product knowledge, write games, because that's the most difficult part when you understand whether you can do that. But if you want to get as a position of game designer, don't wait for a position of game designer to become available. Get into the industry, as in any job. Go work in a Games Workshop store. Get a job as anything in an industry, in one of the companies in the industry. Work your way into the position of game designer from the inside of the company. It's a lot easier than from the outside of the company.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to our panel. Our panelists will be around for the next 15 minutes or so if you want to grab them and ask them any more questions. And we hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and salute.